I woke up in a body bag, the zipper digging into my cheek, and the sterile stench of formaldehyde burning my nostrils. My grandson, Michael, had staged my death from a heart attack to steal my inheritance, and now I was trapped in the city morgue. I had to get out before the morning shift arrived in less than 2 hours. My fingers scrambled against the slick plastic, searching for a weak spot. Every movement sent sharp pains through my stiff joints, a reminder of my 72 years. The cold metal table beneath me felt like ice against my back. I heard distant voices echoing down the hall, growing closer. My heart hammered against my ribs as I managed to tear a small hole in the bag near my feet. Suddenly, the door to the room creaked open, and footsteps approached. I froze, holding my breath. A man muttered about a paperwork mix-up, his shoes clicking on the tile floor. He stopped right beside my table, and I felt his hand press down on the bag. Then his phone rang, and he stepped away to answer it, his voice fading as he walked out. I seized the chance, ripping the bag open wider and sliding out onto the floor. My legs wobbled, but I crouched behind a gurney, peering through the gap. On the counter, I spotted my own file, labelled Deceased, Cardiac Arrest. But next to it was a note in Michael's handwriting. Dispose quickly, no autopsy. My blood ran cold. Just then, the door swung open again, and a bright overhead light flicked on, illuminating my hiding spot. I slipped out of the morgue through a service entrance, the pre-dawn air biting through my thin hospital gown. I needed to reach my old friend Martha's apartment across town before anyone recognized me. Every shadow felt like a threat, and my knees ached with each step. I kept to back alleys, avoiding the main streets where security cameras watched. Michael had resources, my money, my house keys, maybe even people watching for me. A police cruiser slowed near an intersection, and I ducked behind a dumpster, my heart thudding. The car moved on, but I noticed a man in a dark coat lingering under a streetlight, staring at his phone. He looked familiar, one of Michael's golf buddies. I changed direction, cutting through a narrow park, the dew soaking my slippers. Halfway across, I heard footsteps behind me, steady and purposeful. I quickened my pace, my breath fogging in the chill. A dog barked nearby, and the footsteps halted. Glancing back, I saw the man turn and walk away, as if called off. Relief washed over me, but then I reached into my gown pocket and found a small, folded note I hadn't put there. Unfolding it, I saw 2 words. Stop now. My hands trembled. I made it to Martha's building, buzzing her apartment, but no one answered. The lobby door was locked. As I turned to leave, a window above creaked open, and Martha's face appeared, pale and frightened. She mouthed, "He's here," before vanishing inside. I retreated to a nearby bus shelter, shivering in the grey morning light. I had to access my safe deposit box at First Federal Bank before Michael could clean it out. I was running on fading strength. I hadn't eaten or slept properly in days. I knew Michael had influence. He might have alerted the bank or had someone watching. I bought a cheap hoodie from a thrift store, pulling it over my gown to blend in. The bank opened in an hour, and I needed proof. Documents, a will, anything to show I was alive. I walked the 10 blocks, my feet blistering in the ill-fitting shoes I'd found. Outside the bank, I paused, scanning the street. A black sedan idled across the road, its windows tinted. My stomach knotted. Inside, the lobby was quiet, but the teller I approached frowned at my dishevelled appearance. I showed my driver's license, thankfully still in my pocket, and asked for my box. She hesitated, then led me to the vault. As she unlocked it, I noticed her glancing at a photo on her desk, a picture of Michael from a charity event. My box was heavier than I remembered. Pulling it out, I opened the lid to find it stuffed with cash and jewellery, but my important papers were gone. In their place lay a single new key and a sticky note with Grandma's cottage scrawled in Michael's writing. The teller coughed, and I looked up to see the bank manager approaching, his expression stern. He gestured for me to follow him to his office. I sat in the manager's office, the plush chair feeling like a trap. I had to get out with the box contents and figure out why Michael left that key. I risked being reported or detained. The manager, Mr. Higgins, leaned across his desk, his voice low. "Mrs. Eleanor, we received a call about possible fraud involving your accounts." Michael had anticipated me at every turn. He'd preempted me. I kept my hands steady, clutching the box. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice raspy. He nodded slowly, but his eyes darted to a monitor showing security footage. On it, I saw the black sedan from outside, now parked right at the bank's entrance. Higgins offered me water, stalling. I stood, insisting I had to leave. He didn't stop me, but as I walked out, a guard fell into step beside me, for my safety. In the lobby, I spotted the man from the park, Michael's friend, standing near the doors, talking on his phone. I ducked into the restroom, locking the stall door. My mind raced. The key felt cold in my hand. I remembered the cottage, a remote place Michael hated, where I'd stored old family albums. Why would he send me there? Peeking out, I saw the guard waiting outside the restroom. I climbed onto the toilet tank and pushed open the small, high window. It led to an alley. I squeezed through, scraping my elbows, and dropped into a pile of cardboard boxes. As I landed, I heard a car door slam and footsteps rushing toward me from the street. I ran through the alley, the key digging into my palm. I had to reach the bus station and get to the cottage before Michael's people caught me. I was exhausted. Every breath felt like fire. I knew Michael had money to hire watchers, and now they were closing in. I ducked into a convenience store, buying a ticket with crumpled cash from the box. The clerk eyed my hoodie and dirty hands, but said nothing. On the bus, I took a back seat, watching out the window. The black sedan followed for a few blocks, then turned away. Relief trickled in, but my muscles stayed tense. 2 hours later, I got off near the wooded area where the cottage stood. The path was overgrown, and the air smelled of pine and damp earth. My knees protested the climb, but I pushed on. The cottage looked abandoned, shutters hanging loose. I used the key on the rusted lock, and the door creaked open. Inside, dust motes danced in the dim light. I headed for the basement, where I kept the albums, but the steps groaned under my weight, and halfway down, I froze. The room below was lit by a single bulb, and in the center, a figure sat in a chair, back to me. It was Martha, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Behind me, the door slammed shut, and a familiar voice said, "Hello, Grandma. I knew you'd come here." Michael's voice cut through the dusty silence, and I turned slowly, my back pressing against the cold basement wall. He stood by the door, a smug grin on his face, holding a small knife. I had to disarm him and free Martha before he could harm either of us. My legs trembled from the climb and fear, every joint aching. Michael stepped closer, his eyes cold. "You shouldn't have come here, Grandma. This ends now." He moved toward Martha, knife raised. Suddenly, a loud crash came from upstairs, a window breaking. Michael jerked his head toward the sound, distracted. I lunged, grabbing an old metal pipe from a stack of junk and swinging it hard. It connected with his arm, and the knife clattered to the floor. He cried out, stumbling back. I scrambled to Martha, fumbling with the ropes binding her wrists. Her eyes were wide with panic, but she nodded toward the stairs. As I loosened the last knot, headlights flashed through the basement window, illuminating the room. Michael was already on his feet, clutching his arm, but he smiled. "They're here," he said softly. I pulled Martha up, and we bolted for the stairs, but the door at the top swung open, revealing two silhouettes against the fading daylight. We burst out of the cottage into the woods, Martha and I stumbling over roots and rocks. I needed to reach the main road and flag down help before Michael's accomplices caught us. My breath came in ragged gasps, and a sharp pain shot through my side with every step. Behind us, shouts echoed as they gave chase. Martha gripped my arm, her face pale. "Eleanor? We can't outrun them," she whispered. I pushed on, remembering an old hunter's trail that led to a nearby highway. The dusk was deepening, making it harder to see. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the trees ahead, a woman I didn't recognize, holding a flashlight. She raised a hand, signaling us to stop. "I'm a friend," she said quickly. "I saw what happened at the bank. Michael's been tracking you through your accounts." My mind raced. Was this another trap? But she gestured urgently toward a hidden path. "This way, hurry." We followed, and she led us to a small clearing where a beat-up truck was parked. As she opened the door, a shot rang out, splintering a tree near my head. We dove into the truck, and she sped off. But in the rearview mirror, I saw Michael's car pulling onto the road behind us. The woman driving introduced herself as Sarah, a former employee of Michael's who he'd fired for asking too many questions. I had to trust her and get to a safe place where I could gather evidence against Michael. My body was shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion, and Martha was silent beside me, clutching her chest. Sarah explained that Michael had been siphoning funds from my accounts for months, using a fake identity. "He has people everywhere, even in the police," she said, her eyes darting to the mirror. We were on a winding back road, headlights still trailing us. I needed proof, something solid to take to the authorities. Sarah suggested an old storage unit she knew about, where Michael kept documents. She took a sharp turn into an industrial area, losing the pursuers momentarily. We parked behind a warehouse, and she led us to a locked unit. Using a key from her pocket, she opened it. Inside, file boxes were stacked high. I started searching, my hands trembling. In one box, I found photos of Michael with known criminals and transaction records. But as I pulled out a folder, the unit's door suddenly slammed shut, and a lock clicked from the outside. Sarah's voice came through the metal, cold and clear. "Sorry, Eleanor. Michael pays better." Trapped in the dark storage unit with Martha, I had to find another way out before Michael arrived. The air was thick with dust, and my lungs burned with each breath. Martha slumped against a box, her face ashen. "We're done for," she murmured. I refused to believe that. I scanned the room. No windows, just metal walls. I focused on breaking the lock or finding a weak spot. I remembered the metal pipe from the cottage, but I had nothing like that here. Instead, I used a sharp-edged box cutter I found in one of the containers. I worked on the door's hinge, scraping relentlessly. The noise echoed in the small space. Outside, I heard engines approaching and doors slamming. Michael's voice called out, "Give it up, Grandma. It's over." I ignored him, focusing on the hinge. Suddenly, the door shuddered, as if hit from outside. A gap appeared near the bottom. Someone was prying it open. Light spilled in, and I saw a boot kicking at the door. It swung open, and a man I didn't know stood there, holding a crowbar. Behind him, Michael smiled. "Time to go," he said. But as he stepped forward, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Michael's smile faded, and he glanced back toward the street. The man with the crowbar hesitated, and in that moment, I shoved a heavy box into Michael's path, knocking him off balance. We scrambled out of the storage unit into the cool night air, Martha and I running toward the sirens. I had to reach the police and show them the evidence before Michael could silence us. My legs felt like lead, and a cut on my hand bled freely. The industrial park was lit by flashing red and blue lights as cop cars surrounded the area. Michael and his men scattered, but he shouted after me, "You'll never prove anything." I clutched the folder of documents tight against my chest. An officer approached, his hand on his holster. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I started explaining, but my words came out jumbled. Martha stepped in, her voice steadier, pointing toward Michael, who was being restrained by another officer. I handed over the folder, my fingers shaking. The officer skimmed the contents, his expression turning grim. "We'll need to take you in for statements," he said. As we were led to a patrol car, I saw Sarah being cuffed nearby. She had been working with Michael all along. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. At the station, while giving my statement, a detective pulled me aside. "Mrs. Eleanor, we found something in your records, a life insurance policy on Michael, taken out in your name years ago. It looks like you had motive too." My blood ran cold as I realized Michael had set this up to frame me. The detective's words hung in the air like a death sentence. I was now the suspect in my own grandson's plot. I had to convince the police of the truth before they charged me with fraud, or worse. My body ached from the night's ordeal, and the cut on my hand throbbed with each heartbeat. The detective, a stern man named Briggs, leaned across the table, pushing the insurance document toward me. "This policy was taken out 6 months ago, Mrs. Eleanor. Convenient, given the circumstances." Michael had planned this perfectly, using my identity to create motive. I insisted it was forged, but Briggs shook his head, citing verified signatures. Just then, Martha was brought in, her statement conflicting with mine under pressure. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. Suddenly, a young officer entered, whispering to Briggs about a call from higher up. Briggs excused himself, leaving me with a guard. I spotted a familiar face on the security monitor in the corner. Michael, in another room, smirking as he spoke to an officer. My blood boiled. When Briggs returned, his demeanor had shifted. "We're holding you for further questioning," he said, but his eyes avoided mine. As they led me to a holding cell, I caught a glimpse of Michael being escorted out, free. The cell door clanged shut, and I slumped onto the cold bench, realizing he had someone inside the department working for him. Alone in the cell, I knew I had to find a way to contact someone outside who could help. Maybe a lawyer or an old contact from my past. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled the air, and my joints stiffened from the hard bench. Hours passed, and no one came. I overheard guards talking about shift changes and a VIP treatment for Michael. My mind raced back to the storage unit documents. If I could get them analyzed, they might prove the forgery. A female officer brought me water, her badge reading O'Malley. She seemed sympathetic, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Rough night?" she asked softly. I nodded, mentioning the evidence folder. Her eyes narrowed, and she glanced down the hall before whispering, "I saw the file. Something's off." She slipped a pen and a napkin into my hand, then walked away. I scribbled a note to my late husband's friend, a retired forensic expert, pleading for help. But as I folded it, the cell door buzzed open, and Briggs entered with two others. "We're moving you to a secure facility," he announced. O'Malley avoided my gaze, and I realized she might have been testing me. They handcuffed me and led me out, but in the parking garage, a van pulled up abruptly, its doors swinging open to reveal masked men inside. The masked men grabbed me, shoving me into the van before the officers could react. I had to survive this abduction and uncover who was behind it, Michael or his allies. The van sped off, tires screeching, and I was thrown against a metal wall, pain shooting through my shoulder. The interior was dark, smelling of gasoline and sweat. One man tied my hands, his grip rough. "Boss wants you quiet," he grunted. I recognized his voice. It was the same man from the bank, Michael's golf buddy. We drove for what felt like hours, the city lights fading into countryside darkness. My mind clung to the napkin note still hidden in my pocket. If I could get it to someone, there was hope. Suddenly, the van swerved and shouts erupted from the front. A collision, metal crunching, glass shattering. The van lurched to a stop, and the back doors flew open from the impact. I scrambled out, crawling into a ditch beside the road. The drivers were arguing, distracted by a fender bender with another car. In the confusion, I slipped into the woods, the handcuffs cutting into my wrists. I ran until I found a secluded spot, then used a sharp rock to work on the cuffs. As I freed one hand, headlights approached on a nearby path. A pickup truck slowing down. The driver stepped out, and I recognized him. Frank, my husband's old friend, holding a flashlight and my crumpled note. "Eleanor? I got your message," he said. But his eyes were wary, and he held a gun at his side. Frank lowered the gun slowly, but his expression was guarded. I had to gain his trust and use his forensic skills to analyze the insurance document. My body shivered in the cold night, and the handcuff marks on my wrists stung. He led me to his truck, explaining he'd been tracking strange activity around my accounts since my death. "Michael's been busy," Frank said, his voice grim. He drove us to a remote cabin he used as a lab, filled with computers and scanning equipment. I showed him the napkin note and described the policy. He nodded, pulling up databases. "If it's forged, the ink or paper will tell," he muttered. As he worked, I noticed photos on his wall. Images of Michael with known associates, including one from the storage unit. Frank saw me looking and sighed. "I've been investigating him for months, Eleanor. He's into something bigger. Money laundering, using your assets." The pressure mounted. Michael's network was vast, and time was short. Just then, an alarm beeped on Frank's computer, a security breach alert. He cursed, grabbing a rifle. "They found us." Through the window, I saw figures moving in the trees, surrounding the cabin. Frank handed me a flash drive. "The proof is on here. Get to the federal building in the city." He pushed me toward a back exit, but as I slipped out, a shot rang out, and Frank collapsed inside, blood spreading across his shirt. I fled into the woods, the flash drive clutched in my hand, my only goal to reach the federal building and expose Michael. Branches scratched my face, and my lungs burned with the effort of running. Behind me, shouts and gunshots echoed, Frank's sacrifice buying me time. I followed a creek bed, staying low, until I reached a rural road. Dawn was breaking, casting a pale light over the fields. I needed transportation. Hitchhiking was too risky. Spotting a farmhouse ahead, I approached cautiously. An elderly woman was feeding chickens in the yard. I explained I was in trouble, and she let me use her phone, her eyes kind but suspicious. I called a taxi from a nearby town, using the last of my cash from the storage box. While waiting, I noticed a news report on her TV, a bulletin about my escape from police custody, labeling me armed and dangerous. Michael's influence had spread to the media. The taxi arrived, and I got in, directing the driver to the city. Halfway there, the driver's phone buzzed. He answered, then glanced at me in the mirror. "Change of plans, ma'am," he said, turning down a deserted road. My heart sank. He was one of them. I grabbed the door handle, ready to jump, but he slammed on the brakes, and a car pulled up beside us. Out stepped Michael, holding a syringe, his face calm. "Time for your real heart attack, Grandma," he said, stepping toward the taxi door. I kicked the taxi door open, slamming it into Michael as he lunged with the syringe. The needle grazed my arm, but I shoved past him, stumbling onto the gravel road. I had to get away and protect the flash drive with the evidence against him. My shoulder screamed from the impact, and my breath came in ragged gasps. Michael recovered quickly, shouting to his accomplices, who spread out to cut off my escape. The taxi driver revved the engine, blocking one path, while Michael advanced, syringe still in hand. I bolted toward a dense thicket, thorns tearing at my clothes. Suddenly, a car horn blared from the main road, a delivery truck speeding toward us. The driver swerved, skidding to a halt between me and Michael. In the confusion, I dove into the woods, crawling under a fallen log. Michael's voice echoed, "She can't get far." But as I caught my breath, I heard another sound, a dog barking nearby, and then a man's voice calling, "Over here." Peering through the leaves, I saw a hiker with a German shepherd staring right at my hiding spot. The hiker raised his phone, and I realized he was taking a picture. Before I could move, he spoke into the phone. "I found her. Send the coordinates." My heart sank. He was one of Michael's lookouts. I scrambled deeper into the woods, the hiker's shouts fading behind me. I needed to find shelter and access the flash drive to expose Michael's forgery. My body ached from the run, and a deep cut on my leg bled steadily. The forest was thick, and I had no idea where I was heading. Michael's network was everywhere. Even random hikers were on his payroll. I followed a stream, hoping it would lead to a road or house. After an hour, I spotted a small cabin through the trees, smoke rising from the chimney. Approaching cautiously, I saw an older man splitting wood outside. He looked up, his eyes widening at my disheveled state. "You lost?" he asked, setting down his axe. I explained I was in trouble, and he invited me in, offering food and a phone. His name was Ben, a retired logger living alone. While I ate, I noticed a computer in the corner, a chance to check the flash drive. Ben seemed kind, but I hesitated, remembering Sarah's betrayal. As I weighed my options, Ben's phone rang. He answered, his expression turning serious. "Yeah, she's here," he said quietly, glancing at me. I froze, but then he hung up and handed me the phone. "It's for you?" he said. A familiar voice came through, Martha, sounding frantic. "Eleanor, thank God. The police are looking for you. I have proof Michael framed you." But as she spoke, I heard a faint click on the line, like another call being monitored. I held the phone tight, Martha's words ringing in my ears. I had to verify her claim and get the proof without walking into another trap. My body was weary, and trust felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Ben watched me, his face unreadable. Martha insisted she had documents from Michael's office, hidden in a safe deposit box only I could access. "Meet me at the old library downtown in 2 hours," she said, before hanging up. Ben offered to drive me, but I declined, sensing danger. Instead, I asked to use his computer. He agreed, and I inserted the flash drive. Files loaded, transaction records, photos, and the forged insurance policy. But as I scanned them, I noticed anomalies. Dates didn't match, and some signatures were pixelated. This wasn't enough. I needed the originals. Suddenly, the computer screen flickered and a warning popped up. Remote access detected. Ben cursed, pulling the plug. They're tracking us, he said, grabbing a keys from a hook. We need to go now. He led me to his truck, but as we drove off, a black sedan appeared behind us, matching our speed. Ben took a sharp turn into an alley, but the sedan followed, its windows rolling down to reveal men with guns. Ben slammed the brakes, and we crashed into a dumpster, the impact jarring my bones. Through the windshield, I saw Michael stepping out of the sedan, holding a folder. "I have what you want, Grandma," he called out, waving the documents. "But you'll have to come and get them." Trapped in the wrecked truck, I had to decide whether to confront Michael or find another escape. Pain shot through my ribs from the crash, and the smell of gasoline filled the air. Ben was unconscious beside me, blood trickling from his forehead. Michael approached slowly, his men fanning out to surround us. I clutched the flash drive, knowing it was my only leverage. But Michael's folder tempted me. If it held the originals, I could clear my name. As he reached the truck door, I kicked it open, catching him off guard. The folder fell from his hands, papers scattering. I dove for them, grabbing a handful before rolling under the truck. Shouts erupted, and gunfire rang out, bullets pinging off the metal. I crawled to the other side, finding cover behind a stack of pallets. Glancing at the papers, I saw bank statements and a notarized letter, all pointing to Michael's laundering scheme. But one page stood out. A photo of me from years ago with a handwritten note. "She knows too much." It was from Frank, the forensic expert, dated before his death. My blood ran cold. Frank had been warning me, but Michael intercepted it. Just then, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Michael's men hesitated, and he barked orders to retreat. As they pulled away, I stayed hidden. But a shadow fell over me. A police officer stood there, his gun drawn. "Eleanor, you're under arrest," he said. But his badge was crooked, and his eyes held a familiar coldness. He was one of Michael's. The imposter officer hauled me to my feet, his grip like iron. I had to break free and use the papers I'd grabbed to prove my innocence. My ribs ached with every movement, and the flash drive felt heavy in my pocket. He dragged me toward an unmarked car, ignoring my protests. "Michael's waiting," he sneered, shoving me into the back seat. The car sped off, taking back roads away from the city. I scanned the interior for an escape. Child locks were on, windows sealed. The driver, another of Michael's men, glanced back with a smirk. I pretended to slump in pain, secretly loosening the seatbelt. As we turned a corner, I spotted a landmark, the old library where Martha wanted to meet. It gave me an idea. I feigned a coughing fit, drawing their attention. "I need air," I gasped, clutching my chest. The imposter officer leaned closer, and I headbutted him, stunning him momentarily. In the confusion, I grabbed the door handle and kicked, but it didn't budge. The driver swore, swerving the car. Suddenly, a delivery van cut us off, forcing us to stop. The van driver jumped out, yelling about reckless driving. In the chaos, I smashed the window with my elbow, glass shattering everywhere. I squeezed out, landing on the pavement, and ran toward the library. Behind me, shots were fired, but I didn't look back. Inside the library, it was quiet, empty, except for a figure at a study table. Martha, her hands trembling as she held a stack of files. But as I approached, she looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry," she whispered, pointing to the shadows where Michael emerged, holding a gun. "It's over," he said. But then the library lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. The library plunged into darkness, and I dropped to the floor, the cold linoleum biting through my clothes. I had to use the blackout to escape Michael and secure the evidence in my pocket. My ribs screamed from the earlier crash, and every movement sent sharp pains through my body. Michael's voice cut through the silence. "Stay where you are, Grandma!" I heard his footsteps moving cautiously, the click of his gun's safety disengaging. Martha whimpered nearby, and I crawled toward her, my hands brushing against fallen books. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm. Martha's. She shoved a small key into my palm and whispered, "Storage locker 42P. All the originals are there." Then she pushed me away, shouting, "Over here, Michael!" creating a diversion. I scrambled toward a fire exit, my heart pounding. As I reached the door, the emergency lights flickered on, illuminating Michael aiming at me. But before he could fire, a bookshelf toppled over, knocked by Martha, blocking his path. I burst through the exit into an alley, but a car engine roared to life, headlights blinding me. A door swung open, and a voice called, "Get in!" It was the imposter officer from earlier, his face grim. I hesitated, but he showed a badge, a real one this time. "I'm FBI undercover. We've been watching Michael." As I slid into the passenger seat, he sped off, but his phone buzzed with a message. "Target acquired. Proceed as planned." His knuckles tightened on the wheel, and I realized I might have jumped into another trap. The undercover agent drove through back streets, his silence unnerving. I needed to verify his identity and get to storage locker 42B before Michael's people did. My cut leg throbbed, and exhaustion made my vision blur. The agent, who introduced himself as Carter, claimed he'd infiltrated Michael's network to build a case. "We have a safe house," he said, but his eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror. I clutched the key Martha gave me, wondering if it was another setup. We pulled into a garage beneath an apartment building, and Carter led me to a sparse room with monitoring equipment. "Rest here," he urged, handing me a bottle of water. But I noticed a photo on the desk. Carter with Michael at a charity event, both smiling. My stomach twisted. I pretended to drink, then feigned dizziness, slumping against the wall. Carter approached, his expression shifting to cold efficiency. "Sorry, Eleanor, but Michael pays well," he muttered, reaching for handcuffs. Just then, the door burst open, and two figures in black tactical gear rushed in, guns raised. "FBI, freeze!" one shouted. Carter spun, drawing his weapon, but a shot rang out, and he collapsed. The lead agent helped me up, her badge gleaming. "We're here to help," she said. But as she spoke, her radio crackled with a coded message, and her eyes narrowed at the key in my hand. "That locker's already been compromised," she said softly. "Michael's men are waiting for you there." I stood in the safe house, surrounded by FBI agents. But trust was a fragile thing. I had to find a way to access the storage locker without walking into an ambush. My body felt heavy with fatigue, and the agent's warning echoed in my mind. The lead agent, Reyes, explained they'd been tracking Michael for money laundering and fraud, but internal leaks had hampered their investigation. "We need that evidence," she said, but her team seemed on edge, whispering among themselves. I showed them the key and the flash drive, suggesting a coordinated strike. Reyes agreed, planning a raid on the locker for dawn. They gave me a cot to rest, but sleep was impossible. Every noise made me jump. Hours later, As they prepared to move out, I overheard Reyes on a secure line, her voice tense. "Yes, the package is secure. Proceed with extraction." The word extraction set off alarms. It was the same term Michael's men used. I slipped out of the room, heading for the bathroom, and found a vent loose in the ceiling. Climbing up, I squeezed into the crawl space, my joints protesting. Below, I heard Reyes confronting another agent about a mole in their team. Suddenly, gunfire erupted in the hallway and shouts filled the air. Peering through a grate, I saw agents scrambling, and Reyes fell, clutching her side. Then, Michael's voice came over a loudspeaker, calm and mocking. "Come out, Grandma. It's time to end this." But as I backed away, the vent gave way, and I dropped into a hidden room filled with files and a familiar face. Ben, the logger, tied to a chair, alive but bruised. Ben's eyes widened as I landed beside him, his mouth gagged. I had to free him and use this hidden room to uncover the truth before Michael found us. My fall had jarred my injured ribs, and pain shot through my side. The room was small, lined with shelves of documents and a computer terminal. I untied Ben, and he gasped. "They brought me here after the crash. This is Michael's backup data center." He explained that Michael stored digital copies of all his forgeries here, accessible only with a password. I inserted the flash drive, but the terminal required a key code. Ben remembered overhearing a phrase, "Grandma's birthday." I typed it in, and the screen unlocked, revealing files linking Michael to police corruption and the fake insurance policy. But as we downloaded the data, footsteps approached outside the door. Ben barricaded it with a filing cabinet, but the handle turned. "We have to go out the window," he urged, pointing to a small, grimy pane. He boosted me up, and I kicked it open, glass shattering. As I climbed through, I heard the door splintering behind us. We dropped into another alley, but Ben stumbled, clutching his chest. "Go, Eleanor," he wheezed. "I'll hold them off." He shoved a USB drive into my hand, the downloaded data, and turned back toward the building. I ran, but at the alley's end, a van screeched to a halt, and Michael stepped out, holding a device that blinked with a red light. "Signal jammer?" he said smoothly. "No calls, no transmissions? Now give me the drive." But as he advanced, a shadow moved behind him, and Martha emerged, holding a tire iron. "I'm done with your lies, Michael," she said, swinging it hard at his head. Michael crumpled under Martha's blow, the jammer clattering to the ground. I had to get the USB drive to a secure location and contact real authorities. My body was at its limit, every muscle screaming in protest. Martha helped me up, her face etched with regret. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. He threatened my family," she explained quickly. We hurried down the street, but the van's driver emerged, firing shots that ricocheted off the pavement. We ducked into a subway entrance, descending into the crowded tunnels. The noise and chaos provided cover, but my legs felt like giving out. Martha led me to a maintenance room, locking the door behind us. "We can use the subway's network to send the files," she said, pointing to a terminal. But as she plugged in the USB, the screen flashed a warning. "Corrupted data." My heart sank. Ben must have given me a damaged drive, or it was tampered with. Martha cursed, pulling out her phone. "I have a contact at the news station. We can go there." But then, the door shuddered under heavy blows, and voices shouted, "FBI, open up!" Through the peephole, I saw Agent Reyes, her arm bandaged, flanked by officers. Relief washed over me, but as Martha unlocked the door, Reyes's smile didn't reach her eyes. She took the USB drive, then nodded to her team. "Secure them." They handcuffed us both, and Reyes leaned close, her whisper cold. Michael owns this city, Eleanor. Even the FBI. As they led us away, the subway lights flickered, and on a monitor I saw a live news report, my face labelled fugitive, with a ticker below. Grandmother implicated in massive fraud scheme. The screen then cut to Michael, giving a press conference, smiling as he announced a charitable donation from my estate. The handcuffs bit into my wrists as Agent Reyes shoved me into the back of an armoured van, Martha beside me. I had to break free and find a way to transmit the real evidence before Michael erased all traces of my existence. Every jolt of the van sent pain radiating from my ribs, and the stale air made it hard to breathe. Reyes sneered. "Enjoy the ride, Eleanor. Michael has a special place for you." The van sped through the city, its windows blacked out, but I caught glimpses of streets through a small crack in the door. Martha whispered. I hid a backup drive in my shoe, the uncorrupted files. Hope flickered, but then the van swerved and brakes screeched. Voices shouted outside, and the door flew open to reveal a squad of police in riot gear. "We're taking over," one officer barked, showing a warrant. Reyes argued, but they forced her team back, uncuffing us. Relief washed over me until I saw the officer's name tag. It was the same imposter from earlier, smirking. He leaned in. "Michael's orders. We're heading to a secure location." As they led us to a different vehicle, I spotted a news van parked nearby, its camera pointed at us. The reporter was live, but instead of helping, she announced, "The fugitive grandmother captured after a dramatic chase." Then, the camera panned to Michael, who stepped out of a limousine, waving to the crowd as if a hero. My blood boiled, but Martha nudged me, nodding toward a man in the crowd, Ben, alive and holding up a small device. He mouthed, "Signal transmitter," before blending back into the chaos. We were driven to a warehouse on the industrial outskirts, the imposter officer gripping my arm too tightly. I needed to use Ben's signal to alert someone trustworthy and expose the corruption. My body ached from the rough handling, and a headache pounded behind my eyes. The warehouse was dim, filled with crates and the smell of oil. They shoved us into a room with a single table and chairs, the door locking behind us. Martha quickly pulled the backup drive from her shoe and inserted it into a port on an old computer terminal in the corner. "It's working," she said, but the screen showed a password prompt. I remembered Frank's notes, his birth year. I typed it in, and files began loading. Transaction records, forged documents, even audio recordings of Michael bribing officials. But as we prepared to send them, the door burst open, and Michael entered, flanked by 2 armed men. "Did you really think you'd win?" he said, calm as ever. He held up a remote, pressing a button that shut down the computer. "I own the grid here." Just then, the lights flickered, and an alarm blared through the building. Through the window, I saw Ben outside, waving from a utility truck. He'd cut the power. In the confusion, Martha tackled one guard, and I grabbed a metal pipe from a crate, swinging at Michael. He dodged, but the pipe hit the remote, smashing it. The lights surged back on, and the computer screen lit up with a message. "Transmission initiated?" But Michael laughed, pointing to a countdown on the screen. 10 seconds until a system wipe. "You're too late," he said, as the armed men advanced. I lunged for the computer, my fingers scrambling to cancel the wipe command. I had to save the data and ensure it reached the right hands. Pain shot through my arm from the swing, and my vision blurred with exhaustion. Martha struggled with the guards, her cries echoing in the room. The countdown hit 5 seconds. I found an abort option and clicked it, but nothing happened. 3 seconds. I yanked the USB drive out, hoping to preserve it. 2 seconds. The screen went black, and a loud beep signaled the wipe was complete. Michael smiled. Now, no proof. But then, the computer rebooted, and a new screen appeared. Backup restored from cloud storage. Ben's voice came over a speaker system he must have hacked. I mirrored everything, Eleanor. It's safe. Michael's smile vanished, and he barked orders to his men. They rushed us, but the warehouse doors flew open, and federal agents swarmed in. These ones with legitimate badges, led by a stern woman I hadn't seen before. FBI, everyone freeze! She shouted. Michael and his men were surrounded, but he raised his hands slowly, his eyes locking on mine. This isn't over, he whispered. As agents cuffed him, the lead agent approached me. Eleanor, we received your transmission. We're here to help. But then, she glanced at Martha, who was being tended to, and her radio crackled with a message. The commissioner is involved. Proceed with caution. Her expression tightened, and she subtly shifted her stance, blocking the exit. The lead agent, introducing herself as Director Shaw, escorted us out of the warehouse, but her body language felt off. I had to verify her loyalty and get the evidence to a secure outlet without more betrayals. My legs felt weak, and the cut on my leg had reopened, staining my pants with blood. Shaw claimed they'd take us to a federal building for debriefing, but she avoided eye contact. In the car, Martha dozed off, exhausted, while I watched the city pass. We stopped at a nondescript office building, not the federal one I expected. Inside, Shaw led us to a conference room with a large screen. We'll review the evidence here, she said, but her phone buzzed constantly. I noticed a photo on the wall, Shaw with Michael at a political fundraiser. My heart sank. When she left to take a call, I quickly inserted the USB into a port on the table, pulling up the files. But the screen displayed a warning. Access denied. User not authorized. Shaw returned, her smile thin. There's a problem with the system, she said, but her hand drifted toward her holster. Just then, the door opened, and Ben walked in, holding a tablet. I've been tracking the signals, he said, showing a map with red dots. Shaw's location was pinging to a private number linked to Michael. Shaw drew her gun, but Ben activated a jammer, disabling electronics. In the chaos, I grabbed the USB and ran for the door, but Shaw fired, the bullet shattering the glass beside me. As I stumbled into the hall, I saw Martha wrestling with Shaw, and Ben shouted, "Go! The roof! There's a helicopter!" But when I reached the stairwell, the door locked behind me, and Michael's voice came over an intercom. "You're all alone now, Grandma." I climbed the stairs to the roof, each step agony, the USB drive clutched in my sweaty hand. I had to reach the helicopter and get the evidence to the media or higher authorities. My breath came in short gasps, and the rooftop door was heavy, but I pushed it open. The helicopter was there, blades spinning, but no pilot in sight. Wind whipped around me, and the city sprawled below. I hurried toward it, but a figure stepped out from behind the chopper. Michael, free from cuffs, holding a gun. "You're persistent. I'll give you that," he said, aiming at me. I backed away, toward the edge of the roof. "It's over, Michael. The truth is out." He laughed. "Is it? I own the narrative." Just then, the helicopter's radio crackled to life, and a voice announced, "This is the FBI. Stand down, Michael." But Michael didn't flinch. He kept advancing. I spotted a fire extinguisher near the door and lunged for it, spraying foam into his face. He stumbled, firing wildly, the bullet hitting the helicopter's fuel line. Fuel began leaking, and the smell of gasoline filled the air. Michael wiped his eyes, enraged, and charged at me. We struggled near the edge, his grip tight on my arm. But then, Martha burst onto the roof, followed by Ben and Director Shaw, who now had her gun drawn at Michael. "Let her go, Michael!" Shaw yelled. Michael hesitated, and in that moment, I shoved him hard. He lost his balance, falling over the edge, but his hand caught the railing, dangling precariously. He looked up at me, fear in his eyes. "Help me, Grandma," he pleaded. I reached down, but instead of grabbing his hand, I took the USB drive and showed it to him. "This is for my grandson," I said, then turned away as his grip slipped. The sound of his scream was cut short by the impact below. Shaw lowered her gun, her face pale. "It's done?" she said. But then her radio buzzed with news. Michael's body recovered. He had a wire. "The commissioner is issuing a statement blaming you." The helicopter's fuel ignited, and the explosion threw me to the ground, the world going black. I woke up in a hospital bed, handcuffed to the rail, the sterile smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils. The commissioner had framed me for Michael's death, and I was now the prime suspect in a murder investigation. I had to break free and get the USB drive to a secure outlet before they destroyed it. Every muscle screamed in protest as I shifted, and a bandage covered burns from the explosion. A guard sat by the door, his eyes glued to a phone, but I noticed my belongings on a nearby chair, including the USB drive, still in my pocket. My heart raced. They hadn't found it yet. Suddenly, the door opened, and Director Shaw entered, her expression unreadable. "You're awake," she said flatly. "We need to talk about what happened on the roof." She claimed she was there to help, but her hands trembled slightly. I played along, feigning weakness, while slowly working on the handcuff with a bobby pin I spotted on the floor. Shaw leaned in, whispering, "The commissioner is covering his tracks. He's ordered your transfer to a maximum security facility." As she spoke, the guard's phone buzzed, and he stepped out to answer it. Shaw quickly unlocked my handcuff, slipping a key into my hand. "Go now. Use the service elevator," she urged, but her eyes darted toward the hall. I didn't trust her, but I had no choice. I grabbed the USB and slid out of bed, my legs wobbling. In the hallway, I saw 2 orderlies approaching, but they weren't hospital staff. They were Michael's men, recognition flashing in their eyes. I ducked into a supply closet, but the door handle turned from the outside. Trapped in the supply closet, I had to find another exit and transmit the evidence before Michael's men caught me. The small space was dark, filled with the scent of clean linens, and my burns stung with every movement. I felt along the walls, finding a vent cover loose enough to pry open. Crawling into the duct, I moved slowly, the metal groaning under my weight. Below, I heard voices, Shaw arguing with the orderlies. "She can't have gone far," one said. I followed the duct to another room, dropping into an empty office with a computer. Plugging in the USB, I accessed the files, but the network required a password. Remembering Frank's notes, I tried "Justice for All," and it worked. I started uploading to a secure server, but a progress bar showed it would take minutes. Suddenly, the office door clicked open, and Ben stepped in, holding a flashlight. "Eleanor, I'm here to help," he said, but he looked pale, a fresh bruise on his cheek. He explained he'd been detained, but escaped. "The commissioner has agents everywhere," he warned, helping me with the upload. But as the files neared completion, the computer screen flickered and a message appeared. "Upload interrupted. Remote shutdown." Ben cursed, pulling the plug. "They're jamming the signal." He led me to a window, pointing to a fire escape. "We need to go now." As I climbed out, I saw Shaw below, talking on her phone, and she looked up, her expression turning cold. "It's a trap," Ben whispered. But then a shot rang out, and he slumped against the wall, blood spreading on his shirt. I fled down the fire escape, Ben's weight dragging me down, but I had to get him help and finish the upload. The metal stairs felt icy under my bare feet, and the night air bit through my hospital gown. Ben gasped. "Leave me. Save the evidence." I refused, half carrying him to the alley below. We stumbled into a nearby parking garage, hiding behind a car. I used his phone to try sending the files, but no signal. The jammer was still active. Ben's breathing grew shallow, and he pressed a small device into my hand. "Signal booster," he wheezed. "Use it on a high point." I attached it to the phone, and bars appeared, but as I prepared to send, headlights swept the garage. A black SUV pulled in, and Commissioner Harris himself stepped out, flanked by armed men. "Eleanor, it's over," he called, his voice echoing. "Hand over the drive and I'll make sure you get a fair trial." I knew it was a lie. Ben nudged me, pointing to a ventilation shaft on the ceiling. "Go, I'll distract them," he said, pushing me toward a ladder. As I climbed, Ben stood, shouting to draw their attention. Shots fired, and he fell silent. I reached the shaft, but Harris spotted me and ordered his men to follow. Inside, it was tight and dark, but I crawled until I found a rooftop access. Emerging into the open, I saw the city skyline, and the phone finally connected. I hit send, but a notification popped up. "File corrupted. Malware detected." My heart sank. The drive had been tampered with. Then, Harris's voice came from behind me. "You should have taken the deal." Harris advanced, his men spreading out across the roof, blocking any escape. I had to find a way to expose him without the USB, using whatever means left. The cold wind whipped through my hair, and my body trembled from exhaustion and grief for Ben. Harris smiled. "No one will believe you now." I backed toward the edge, remembering Michael's fall. "The truth always comes out," I said, stalling. I noticed a security camera on a nearby building. Maybe it was recording. I shouted, "Commissioner Harris is corrupt. He covered up Michael's crimes." Harris laughed. "That camera's dead, Eleanor." But then a voice echoed from a loudspeaker. Martha, from somewhere below. "I heard everything, and I'm live streaming it." Harris's smile vanished, and he barked orders to his men to find her. In the chaos, I spotted a maintenance ladder leading down and made a run for it. Harris fired, the bullet grazing my arm, but I kept going, climbing down as fast as I could. Below, Martha stood with a phone, surrounded by a growing crowd of bystanders. "I sent the files to a news outlet," she called up to me. But as I reached the ground, Harris's men pushed through the crowd, and one grabbed Martha, silencing her phone. The crowd murmured, unsure, and Harris descended, his authority intimidating them. "This woman is dangerous," he announced, pointing at me. Just then, a news van arrived, and a reporter stepped out. But instead of helping, she nodded to Harris. "We have the story," she said, and the camera turned on me, labeling me a fugitive. Harris moved to arrest me, but a familiar car screeched to a halt. Dr. Evans, my old family doctor, stepped out. "I have something to say," he declared, holding up a medical file. Dr. Evans stood between me and Harris, his face stern. I had to hear what he knew and use it to clear my name before Harris took me in. My arm bled from the graze, and the crowd's eyes felt heavy on me. Evans opened the file, revealing Michael's medical records. He had a terminal illness, Evans announced loudly. He was desperate for money, and he manipulated everyone, including you, Commissioner. Harris paled, but he scoffed. That's irrelevant. The crowd stirred, and the reporter hesitated, her camera still rolling. Evans continued, I have proof Harris knew about Michael's plans and took bribes to look the other way. He handed documents to the reporter, who started reading them aloud. Harris ordered his men to seize the papers, but the crowd blocked them, phones recording everything. I saw my chance and shouted, Check the USB, it has all the evidence. But Harris lunged at me, and we struggled, falling to the ground. His men moved in, but the crowd surged forward, protecting me. In the confusion, I grabbed Evans's arm. We need to get to safety, I said, but he pointed to a car waiting nearby. My associate will take you, he urged. As we pushed through, Harris broke free, his radio crackling with orders to arrest me at all costs. We reached the car, but the driver was someone I didn't recognize, a woman with cold eyes. She smiled. Get in, Eleanor. I'm here to help. But as I slid into the passenger seat, I saw a gun tucked under her leg, and she locked the doors, driving away from the chaos. Michael had many friends, she said softly, and they're not done with you yet. The woman drove with a calm efficiency that chilled me more than any threat. I had to escape this car and expose the remaining corruption before she delivered me to Michael's allies. My arm throbbed where Harris's bullet had grazed it, and exhaustion made my thoughts sluggish. She kept the gun within reach, her eyes occasionally flicking to me. Michael had contingencies, she said softly. People in high places who won't let this go. I pretended to be weaker than I was, slumping against the door while assessing the lock mechanism. We were on a highway, speeding toward the city limits. I needed a distraction. Suddenly, her phone rang, and she answered on speaker. A voice I recognized, Commissioner Harris, barked, Where is she? The woman replied, Secure, heading to the drop point. Harris growled, There's been a leak. The media has the story. Change plans and bring her to me directly. This was my chance. They were panicking. As she ended the call, I feigned a coughing fit, doubling over. I need air, I gasped, reaching for the window button. She hesitated, then rolled down her window slightly. In that moment, I shoved the door handle and threw myself out, tumbling onto the grassy shoulder. The car screeched to a halt, but I rolled into a ditch, pain shooting through my body. I crawled into the woods, hearing her shout and doors slam. But as I hid behind a tree, I saw another car pull up, a familiar sedan, and Martha stepped out, holding a flashlight. Eleanor, over here, she called, but her voice was tight, and she kept looking back toward the road. Behind her, I saw shadows moving in the trees, and I realized we were surrounded. I stayed hidden, my heart pounding as Martha called for me. I had to verify if she was still trustworthy and find a way to use the evidence against Harris and the others. Every breath hurt, and the cold ground seeped into my bones. Martha's flashlight beams swept the area, but her movements were jerky, nervous. Eleanor, please. I have a way to send the files, she insisted. But then I noticed a glint of metal in her other hand, a small device that looked like a tracker. Michael's people must have coerced her again. I remained silent, crawling deeper into the woods, using the darkness as cover. I needed to reach a public place where I could safely transmit the data. After what felt like an hour, I emerged near a roadside diner, its lights a beacon in the night. I slipped inside, heading for the restroom to clean up. In the mirror, I looked decades older, bruises and cuts mapping my face. I used a payphone outside to call Dr. Evans, but his line was busy. As I hung up, a truck pulled into the lot, and the driver, a burly man, stepped out, staring at me. He approached, his expression grim. "You're that grandmother on the news," he said, not unkindly. "I saw the stream. Harris is dirty." He offered me a ride to the city, but I hesitated. Then his radio crackled with a police bulletin describing me as armed and dangerous. His eyes widened, and he backed away. "Sorry, ma'am. I can't get involved," he muttered, hurrying back to his truck. Alone again, I spotted a news van parked across the street, and the reporter from earlier was interviewing someone. But as I watched, Harris himself stepped out of the van, smiling for the camera. He was controlling the narrative, and I was out of time. I ducked behind the diner, my mind racing. I had to get the evidence to a reliable news outlet or federal authority before Harris completely erased the truth. My body screamed for rest, but adrenaline kept me moving. I remembered Ben's signal booster and pulled it from my pocket, attaching it to a nearby electrical box. Using a stolen smartphone from a distracted patron, I tried accessing the cloud where I'd stored the files. The booster worked. I got a connection. I started uploading, but a warning popped up. Network compromised. Harris's people were monitoring everything. Just then, a car pulled up, and Director Shaw stepped out, alone. She looked exhausted, but determined. "Eleanor, I'm here to help," she said, showing me her badge and a file. I turned evidence against Harris. He's been arrested, but his allies are still active. I didn't trust her, but she handed me a tablet with live footage. Harris, in cuffs, being led away. "The USB drive. We need it to make the case stick," she urged. I hesitated, then remembered the corrupted drive, but Shaw smiled weakly. "We recovered the original from Ben before he died. It's safe." Relief washed over me, but as I handed her the drive, a shot rang out, and Shaw collapsed, blood spreading on her coat. I looked up to see the woman from the car standing across the street, lowering a silenced pistol. She waved, then disappeared into the crowd. Shaw gasped. "It's not over. They have someone inside the FBI." Her eyes closed, and I was alone again, the tablet showing Harris's arrest being overturned due to lack of evidence. I crouched beside Shaw's body, my hands trembling. I had to take the drive and get it to the highest authority, maybe the state attorney general, before Michael's network silenced me for good. Pain radiated from my old injuries, and grief for Shaw and Ben weighed me down. I took the drive from Shaw's pocket and fled into the city streets, blending into the early morning crowds. People glanced at me, some with recognition, others with pity or fear. I headed for the federal building, knowing it was my last hope. Outside, a protest was forming, people holding signs about corruption, inspired by the live stream Martha had done. I saw her in the crowd, speaking to a reporter, and she spotted me, her eyes widening. She broke away and ran to me. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry," she cried. "They threatened my daughter, but I've made amends. The files are being broadcast now." She showed me her phone. A major news network was airing the evidence, with Harris's voice clear in bribes. But then, a black SUV pulled up, and armed men emerged. Private security hired by Michael's associates. They pushed through the crowd, aiming for me. Martha stepped in front, shouting for help, and the protesters surged forward, blocking them. In the chaos, I made it to the federal building steps, but the doors were locked, guards hesitant. I held up the drive, yelling for someone to listen. A senior agent emerged, his face familiar. He'd been in the background of Michael's photos. He nodded to the guards, and they moved to arrest me. But then, a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Stand down. This is the Attorney General. We have the evidence, and we're taking over." The agent paled, and the guards stepped back. I handed the drive to an aide, my legs giving way. As I collapsed, I saw Harris on a nearby screen, being rearrested, and the crowd cheered. But my vision blurred, and the last thing I heard was Martha's voice. "It's finally over." I woke in a hospital room, sunlight streaming through the windows, and the steady beep of monitors a comforting rhythm. The fight was done. Harris was in custody, Michael's network dismantled, and my name cleared. I spent days recovering, my body healing slowly, the aches a reminder of all I'd endured. Martha visited often, bringing flowers and stories. Her daughter was safe, and she'd started a group to support victims of fraud. The media called me a hero, but I felt no triumph, only a deep sorrow for the grandson I'd lost long before his death. I returned to my quiet house, now emptier than ever, and sorted through old photos, remembering the boy Michael once was. I donated most of the inheritance to charities, keeping only enough to live simply. In the evenings, I sit on the porch, watching the sunset, and sometimes Martha joins me, our silence filled with understanding. I've planted a garden, tending to roses and herbs, their growth a small promise of renewal. The past doesn't haunt me anymore. It's a story I carry, not a weight. I find peace in the ordinary. A cup of tea, a grandchild's laugh from a neighbour's yard, the rustle of leaves in the wind. Life moves on, gentle and persistent, and I let it, grateful for the stillness after the storm.